In 75 years of fighting wars across Europe and Asia and the Middle East involving conflicts against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan and North Korea and North Vietnam and Iraq, the United States military has never been definitively defeated on the battlefield. And here's what makes that absolutely insane, because during this period America faced enemies who had larger armies or were fighting on their home territory or had technological advantages in specific areas or had populations willing to accept casualties that would be unthinkable in a democracy. And yet, despite fighting simultaneously on opposite sides of the planet against two of history's most powerful military forces in World War II, the United States not only won but did so while suffering fewer casualties than any other major combatant. And the question nobody really asks is how, because the standard explanation about American courage or superior values doesn't explain the actual mechanisms that made military defeat essentially impossible. And there are 8 specific reasons that work together like a system where each element multiplies the effectiveness of the others. And when you understand these 8 factors, you'll see why even when America withdrew from places like Vietnam, it was never because the military was beaten in combat, but because of political decisions made thousands of miles from the battlefield. And the first reason is something so obvious that people overlook its significance, and that's the geographic advantage of fighting every war thousands of miles from American territory, because the United States is protected by 2 massive oceans that make invasion essentially impossible. And this creates an asymmetric situation where American forces can project power globally, but no enemy can threaten the American homeland in any sustained way. And think about what this means strategically. Because when you're fighting a war, your industrial base and supply lines and training facilities are completely secure from enemy attack, and you can build weapons and train soldiers and stockpile supplies without any risk of bombardment or invasion. And compare this to literally every other major power in modern history, because when Germany fought World War II, their factories were being bombed by Allied aircraft and their cities were under siege and their transportation networks were being destroyed. And when Japan fought, they faced the same problem with American bombers. Eventually reaching Tokyo, and the Soviet Union lost 27 million people, including millions of civilians, because the war was fought on Soviet territory, and even Britain, which is an island, faced constant German bombing during the Blitz and had to disperse its industry and live under blackout conditions. But American factories in Detroit and shipyards in California operated at full capacity 24 hours a day with zero risk of enemy attack. And this meant that American industrial output during World War II reached levels that seem almost fictional, because the United States produced nearly 300,000 aircraft during the war compared to around 120,000 for Germany, and over 87,000 tanks compared to around 50,000 for Germany, and built more ships in 4 years than the rest of the world combined. And here's why this advantage compounds: because not only were American factories safe, but American training bases were safe, which meant that pilots could train for hundreds of hours before entering combat, while German and Japanese pilots by 1944 were being sent into battle with minimal training because their training facilities were under constant threat. And the geographic protection also meant that America could choose when and where to fight, because there was no immediate threat forcing hasty decisions, and this allowed for massive build-up periods where the military could prepare properly before committing forces. And the second reason is something that changed warfare fundamentally, and that's the American approach to logistics, which treats supply lines as important as combat forces. And this might sound boring, but it's actually the difference between winning and losing, because wars aren't won by the side with the most tanks or planes. They're won by the side that can keep those tanks fueled and those planes armed and those soldiers fed. And the United States developed the most sophisticated logistics system in military history, starting in World War II and continuing through every subsequent conflict. And here's how this works: because the American military uses something called the tooth-to-tail ratio, which measures combat troops versus support personnel, and the U.S. ratio is typically around 1 to 7, meaning for every combat soldier, there are 7 people providing support through logistics and maintenance and communications and medical care. And other countries often mock this as inefficient because they have ratios closer to 1 to 3, meaning more of their force is direct combat power. But here's what actually happens in real warfare: because the American units can fight continuously for weeks, because they have reliable supply chains, while enemy forces run out of ammunition or fuel or spare parts and have to stop operations. And this was visible in the Gulf War in 1991, when American forces advanced across hundreds of miles of desert, maintaining full combat effectiveness, because supply trucks and fuel tankers and mobile repair units moved with the combat forces, and Iraqi units that seemed formidable on paper collapsed quickly, partly because their logistics couldn't sustain combat operations and the scale of American logistics is almost unbelievable, because during the Afghanistan war, the United States was supplying troops fighting in landlocked mountainous terrain 8,000 miles from American territory, and they did this continuously for 20 years, maintaining bases and aircraft and vehicles and feeding and equipping tens of thousands of soldiers, and this required a global supply chain involving cargo ships and transport aircraft and contracted trucks moving through Pakistan, and this system worked so reliably that American soldiers in remote outposts had access to better food and equipment than soldiers from other countries stationed in their own nations. And the third reason is what really separates American military power from everyone else, and it's the investment in technology, and specifically the willingness to spend enormous sums developing weapon systems that provide decisive advantages. And the numbers here are staggering, because the United States spends more on military research and development than the next 10 countries combined, with annual R&D budgets exceeding $90 billion. And this isn't just about having more money. It's about the philosophy that technological superiority can substitute for numerical superiority and save American lives. And here's why this matters, because in every major conflict since World War II, American forces have had specific technological advantages that changed the nature of combat. And in World War II, it was things like the Norden bomb sight and proximity fuses and radar and eventually nuclear weapons. And in Vietnam, it was helicopters for mobility and precision-guided munitions. And in the Gulf War, it was stealth aircraft and GPS-guided weapons and night vision equipment. And in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was drones and satellite communications and advanced body armor. And each of these technologies didn't just make American forces more effective, they fundamentally changed what was possible in warfare. Because when you can see at night and your enemy can't, you can fight continuously while they have to stop operations after dark. And when you have precision weapons and your enemy doesn't, you can destroy targets with single munitions that would require hundreds of bombs in previous wars. And this creates situations where smaller American forces can defeat larger enemy formations because the technological gap is so overwhelming. And the classic example is the Battle of 73 Easting during the Gulf War, where a single American cavalry troop with 9 tanks destroyed over 50 Iraqi tanks in 23 minutes without suffering any losses, because the American tanks had thermal sights that could see through smoke and sandstorms, while Iraqi crews were effectively blind. And this pattern repeats across every engagement where American technology allows forces to fight from positions of total advantage. And here's the part that makes this sustainable. Because American military technology development isn't just about specific weapons, it's about creating innovation systems. And the United States has defense contractors and research laboratories and testing facilities that exist specifically to develop next-generation capabilities. And this means that even when enemies copy current American technology, which they constantly try to do, the U.S. is already developing the next generation of systems. And the fourth reason is something that seems almost unfair, and that's the alliance system that America built after World War II, which means the United States never fights alone, because there are always coalition partners providing bases and troops and political support. And this creates force multiplication that's impossible to achieve without decades of relationship building. And think about what this actually means in practical terms. Because when the United States went to war in Iraq in 2003, there were 48 countries in the coalition providing everything from combat troops to overflight rights to intelligence sharing. And when operations happened in Afghanistan, over 70 countries contributed in various ways. And this isn't just symbolic, because these partners provide crucial capabilities, like Germany supplied airlift capacity, and Britain contributed special forces, and Poland sent troops for occupation duties, and Japan provided financial support. And this distributed effort means that America's wars are partially funded and staffed by allies, And beyond the direct military contributions, the alliance system provides something even more valuable, which is the global network of military bases that allow power projection anywhere on Earth. And the United States has major bases in Germany and Japan and South Korea and Italy and Bahrain and Qatar and Diego Garcia and Guam. And this network means that American forces can reach any global hotspot within hours, because there's always a nearby base with pre-positioned equipment and fuel. And the fifth reason is the one that explains why Germany and Japan together couldn't win. And it's the sheer scale of American industrial capacity, which even today remains the second largest manufacturing economy in the world, despite decades of outsourcing. And when you combine modern manufacturing with the ability to rapidly mobilize industry for war production, you get a capacity that no other single country can match. And here's why this was decisive in World War II. Because when America entered the war in December 1941, the military was ranked 17th in the world in size and had obsolete equipment and minimal combat experience. But the industrial base allowed a buildup that was unprecedented in speed and scale, because by 1945, just 45 months later, the United States had 12 million people in uniform and had produced the weapons and equipment to supply not just American forces but also huge portions of Soviet and British forces through Lend-Lease. And the statistics are almost unbelievable, because American shipyards were producing one Liberty cargo ship every 42 days, and eventually got that down to less than 5 days per ship. And aircraft factories were producing one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at peak production. And this output was larger than Germany and Japan combined, despite both of those countries having militarized economies that had been preparing for war for years. And here's what made this possible. Because American industry was based on mass production techniques developed in the civilian economy for making cars and appliances. And when those techniques were applied to military production, the efficiency gains were enormous. And American factories used interchangeable parts and assembly line methods and standardized designs that allowed rapid scaling. And the sixth reason is something that operates quietly in the background but makes everything else possible. And that's American control of global energy supplies, which ensures that U.S. forces never run out of fuel, while enemies often do. And this advantage has multiple dimensions, because first, the United States is now the world's largest oil producer, pumping over 12 million barrels per day, which means domestic energy security. And second, America has alliances with most major oil exporting countries, which guarantees access to global supplies. And third, the U.S. Navy protects the shipping lanes that carry oil globally, which means America can interdict enemy energy supplies while protecting its own. And the impact of this shows up in every modern conflict, because American tanks and aircraft and ships operate continuously without fuel constraints, while enemy forces often have to ration fuel and limit operations. And in World War II, this was even more decisive because Germany was desperately short of oil throughout the war and had to develop synthetic fuel production, which was expensive and inefficient. And Japan attacked Southeast Asia partly to secure oil fields because they lacked domestic production, and American submarines sank Japanese tankers, which strangled Japan's war economy. And meanwhile, American forces had effectively unlimited fuel because domestic production plus Venezuelan imports provided more than enough. And this energy dominance continues today because the United States military consumes about 350,000 barrels of oil per day, which sounds like a lot but represents less than 3% of total American consumption. And this means the military can operate at full capacity indefinitely without impacting civilian economy. And the seventh reason is what makes American forces so effective tactically. And it's the training system that emphasizes initiative and decentralized decision-making, which allows junior officers and even enlisted soldiers to make battlefield decisions without waiting for orders from above. And this might seem like a minor cultural difference, but it's actually a massive force multiplier, because warfare is chaotic and communication breaks down and situations change faster than information can travel up and down command chains. And the American military trains soldiers to understand the commander's intent and then figure out how to achieve that intent using their own judgment. And this contrasts sharply with militaries that rely on centralized control, where soldiers wait for Specific orders before acting, and the tactical advantage this creates is enormous because American units can adapt to changing situations in minutes, while enemy forces might take hours to get approval for new approaches. And this was visible in Iraq when American battalion commanders were making decisions about how to attack objectives without needing to ask permission from division headquarters, and this speed of decision-making meant that American forces consistently got inside the enemy's decision cycle, meaning they were acting while enemies were still deciding what to do. And the training that enables this is incredibly expensive because it involves realistic exercises where junior leaders practice making decisions under stress. And this costs billions annually, but produces forces that are far more effective per capita than larger militaries that use cheaper training methods. And the eighth and final reason brings everything together. And it's something that seems intangible but might be the most important factor, and that's the American political system's ability to mobilize national resources for war while maintaining democratic governance. And this creates a unique situation where America can fight long wars without military coups or political collapse, because civilian control remains intact and the economy keeps functioning, and society doesn't militarize in ways that become permanent. And think about what this means historically, because every other major military power in the 20th century either collapsed internally during wars or became authoritarian in ways that eventually destroyed them. And Germany became a totalitarian dictatorship that drove itself to destruction, and Japan's military effectively controlled the government and made catastrophic strategic decisions, and the Soviet Union maintained its system through brutal repression that eventually led to collapse. And meanwhile, the United States fought World War II and Korea and Vietnam and multiple Middle East wars while maintaining democratic elections and free press and civilian economy. And this stability allows for sustained commitment because the system can outlast authoritarian enemies who often face internal collapse. And it also means that American military power is backed by the world's largest economy, which can sustain military spending indefinitely because U.S. defense spending is currently around 3.5% of GDP, which is high by peacetime standards, but is sustainable indefinitely and can be increased dramatically if necessary. Because during World War II, defense spending reached 40% of GDP, which shows the mobilization potential. And here's why: all 8 of these reasons together made it impossible for Germany and Japan to win even fighting together. Because Germany faced an enemy that was geographically invulnerable, with factories that couldn't be reached, and industrial capacity that outproduced Germany by factors of 2 or 3 in every category, and technological innovation that matched or exceeded German capabilities, and energy supplies that were effectively unlimited, and logistic systems that could supply forces anywhere in the world, and alliances that meant fighting not just America, but also Britain and the Soviet Union, and political stability that meant the American commitment wouldn't collapse. And Japan faced exactly the same problems on the Pacific side, where American shipyards were producing carriers faster than Japanese submarines could sink them, and American industry was building aircraft in quantities that made Japanese production look insignificant, and American forces had fuel and supplies that allowed continuous operations, while Japan was rationing everything. And the combination of these two enemies meant that American industry had to supply 2 completely separate wars simultaneously, which it did successfully because the Atlantic and Pacific theaters each received more weapons and supplies than most countries produced for their entire war efforts. And this demonstrated that American military capacity wasn't just superior to Germany or Japan individually, but was superior to both of them combined. And these advantages haven't disappeared in the modern era. They've actually intensified, because American military technology is now so advanced that the gap between U.S. forces and potential enemies is wider than at any point in history, and American logistics can deploy heavy forces anywhere globally within weeks and sustain them indefinitely. And American alliances include most of the world's democracies and wealthiest nations, and American geography still provides complete security for the industrial base. And American energy independence is stronger than ever, and American training produces forces that are individually far more capable than those of any rival. And American political stability remains despite internal divisions, and this combination of factors means that while American forces might withdraw from specific conflicts for political reasons, they have never been and likely never will be defeated militarily, because the structural advantages are simply too overwhelming. and any enemy would have to overcome not just American forces, but the entire system that supports them. And history shows that even the most powerful military coalitions ever assembled couldn't do that.